Hey Hotshot, you should try getting this video out before Dado. That'd be really good for your viewership.
February 25th, 2021 is a day that shall long be remembered, as today is the day I once again became optimistic about the future of Destiny and the direction of the franchise going in the future. What is up, Imperials? This is your man, Emperor Hotshot, and today, Joe Gareth Blackburn and the Destiny dev team have released a chonky State of the Game update talking about the Road to the Witch Queen expansion. You can read the full blog post from Bungie in the link in the description, but I'll be giving you the Spark Notes version here, as well as my own thoughts at the end. Timestamps are all be on screen now, if you want to skip ahead to a particular section, such as my thoughts. Without further ado, let's do further. Let's get the bad news out of the way first. The Witch Queen expansion has been delayed to early 2022. Now, before you get your pitchforks and your torches, it's only good news from here on, as we also got a new unnamed expansion announced for after Lightfall in 2023. Quote, Beyond Light built the foundation and allowed us to weave the world building of Destiny and Destiny 2 together, but the Witch Queen will light a fire on a strongly interconnected narrative across Lightfall and beyond, unlike anything we've attempted before, with characters, arcs, heroes, and villains that persist over multiple future releases. Even more importantly, the conclusion of these releases will also conclude the Light and Darkness saga, the conflict we first introduced with the launch of Destiny many years ago, end quote. In order to deliver on this promise of Destiny being an everlasting action MMO with an ever-evolving world, Bungie needs a bit more time for the expansion to cook. In the meantime, however, Bungie is committed to updating the systematic foundation of Destiny by keeping the armor and weapon game fresh, refining their vision for PvP, and implementing transmog and so much more. In order to keep their loot game fresh, Bungie has announced that they are sunsetting in Season 14. To quote Joe directly, starting in Season 14, we won't be capping the infusion on any weapons or armor that have not already reached the cap as of the start of Season 13, end quote. This means that the falling guillotine you have now or the palindrome god roll you are working towards will be usable forever, even in the raid that launches in 2022 with the Witch Queen. You also won't have to worry about Recluse or Mountaintop rising from the vaults of many users, as they currently can't be infused to max cap. This will of course force outliers in PvE and PvP metas such as Felwinter's Lion Warmind sales to be balanced accordingly, as opposed to being rotated out like previously planned. In the meantime, however, Bungie is going to be researching new methods to create aspirational loot for players to strive for, without feeling like it has an expiration date. The seasonal power grind is also getting reworked slightly as to not feel as oppressive season to season. As opposed to the seasonal power increase of 50 levels, the seasonal cap will be lowered to 10 levels each season. This means when a new season rolls around and you are already at max level in the last, you're already within the 10-point pinnacle band of the power pursuit. Bungie has also finally acknowledged PvP and have shared with us the team's high-level vision for the Crucible. Quote, direct player versus player competition is essential in Destiny, as an option to express mastery of your Guardian and showcase the strength of your arsenal against other players. While they admit it to be a simple vision in the grand scheme of things, they feel it is important to have a unifying vision for the activity. They've also brought us 3 major pain points for the Crucible in the forms of 3-peaking, stasis, and balancing. 3-peaking has long been a major pain point in the upper echelons of competition in Destiny's Crucible scene. For the uninitiated, 3-peaking, or third-person peeking, is where a player utilizes the third-person camera allotted by emotes and swords to peek around corners in the game. For obvious reasons, this destroys the idea of fair play, and Bungie is working to disable emotes and the third-person camera on melee weapons with no ammo in Comp and Trials of Osiris. The Stasis and Light subclass tuning also includes some pretty big changes coming to the game across Seasons 13 and 14. Bungie wants to bring Stasis Supers down to be more in line with those of the Light subclasses, and I've shared with us some of those coming changes. Starting with the Behemoth Titans, they are getting a decrease in damage reduction while on Super, as well as having the cost of Super energy increased for light attacks. Behemoths are also getting AoE freeze on cast remove, and the traveling efficacy of Shiver Strike reduced when slowed. Next we have the Revenant Hunter. They're getting the damage and tracking of Withering Blade decreased. Hunters are also getting a decrease in the slow stacks applied to targets, as well as the damage reduction on Shatter Dive removed entirely. And moving on to Shadebinder Warlocks, they're getting mostly bug fixes. The first of which being a bug where Ice Flare bolts won't track towards targets immediately on creation, and another being where super projectiles weren't tracking until having traveled a certain distance. All these changes are also being capped off with a universal nerf and a decrease to the damage of Crystal Shatters. After the Stasis tuning, Season 15 will focus on a set of focus buffs to light-based subclass specializations that are underutilized, as well as damage reduction to targets frozen by stasis. Finally, Bungie wants to continue to adjust performance of weapon archetypes more regularly, as well as introduce more perks that shift the Crucible meta. This will mean continuing to make balance changes at the beginning, middle, and end of a season, with the end goal of hoping to diversify the types of loadouts you will encounter in the game. In addition, Bungie wants to look at adjusting ability usage in the Crucible to make sure that guns and gunplay remain the key to success in the Crucible. If you thought we were done with Crucible news, we are not. Gameplay balance is only step one of revitalizing the Crucible, game security is the second. Those of us on PC are all too familiar with the fact that cheating continues to be a hot button issue. While Joe and the team can't talk about a lot of the improvements they're making for, quote, fear of empowering the bad guys, they did share with us a few. Bungie has nearly doubled the size of their game security team this year as a reflection of their commitment to fair play. Bungie has also begun to send out regular surveys to better understand the experiences players have with cheaters and measure their progress. If you receive one of these, be sure to fill it out and help them fight cheating. And as some may have seen in the news, Bungie is continuing to pursue aggressive legal action against the developers of cheats. Joe states they plan to share more on security when they can. Finally, Bungie is planning an overhaul of Pinnacle PvP activities, starting of course with Trials of Osiris. The team is hoping to get these structural changes to aspirational PvP activities out by the end of the year, but have shared some of the things they want to target directly with us. The first of these is an improvement on the overall health of the matchmaking pool in Trials of Osiris by incentivizing a wider audience to engage, as well as better defining the separation of tiers and skill. Second is to rebuild the Trials reward structure so that it encourages more players to stick with their active cards longer. As it stands now, the system encourages players to recycle cards after a single loss, meaning that the first year of games is likely to be increasingly challenging. Bungie wants to also build a reward structure that continuously pushes higher skill players to want to progress deeper into their cards even after one loss, while making 3 to 5 wins a much more feasible and achievable goal for more players. Bungie also wants to investigate opportunities for solo players to participate in Trials of Osiris regularly, or at least dip their toes in the activity. After Trials of Osiris, the team plans to target and revitalize the Iron Banner with a similar scope. Moving away from PvP, we have some pretty big news for PvE. In Season 14, the Vault of Glass raid from Destiny 1 will be unvaulted from the Destiny Content Vault and brought into Destiny 2. While the team promises the high-level experience of the raid to remain the same, they assure us that the team has a few surprises in store for us to bring it on par with the other raids in Destiny 2. VOG will also launch with contest mode for the first 24 hours and a world's first raid race. However, as this is a reprisal, contenders will not only have to beat the raid, but will also have to complete a specific set of triumphs from the raid to be crowned world's first. Bungie is also looking to add a master variant of the Vault of Glass later down the line, but weren't ready to commit to a date. They also announced that they'd like future raid and dungeon or RAD content to offer master difficulty versions where players can earn adept raid or dungeon gear. Now we move on to Armor Synthesis, which is Destiny's version of Transmog. In Season 14, Ada 1 from Season of the Forge will return to the tower as the vendor NPC for Armor Synthesis. Each season, Ada 1 will offer a set of bounties that players can complete to receive materials that they need to power her loom, which can in turn turn any piece of armor in your collection screen into a permanent universal ornament. Upon acquiring some ornaments, players can go over to the new appearance screen in the character menu. Here, shaders can be applied universally at one click of a button, or to individual pieces of armors. Shaders are also being made to be permanent unlocks as opposed to a stack of items you need to hold in your inventory. At the start of Season 14, players will receive a starting supply of synthesis materials as a seasonal quest reward. Players will also be able to purchase these materials for silver. Finally, we have some rapid fire points before we end the post. First, crossplay is coming in Season 15. PvP will support closed circles for console and PvP players, outside of scenarios where a console and PC player will play together in the PC Crucible pools. Second, Ikora Rey has been gone from the narrative for quite some time, and will be making a return in Season 14, as well as play a pivotal role in the Witch Queen expansion. Third, starting in Season 15, the first batch of legendary stasis weapons will be released. The fourth and final point, Season 14 will see the second iteration of gilded titles hit the game, where titles will now show the number of times they have been gilded in the past. Thus concludes the Destiny 2 2021 State of the Game. Now for my thoughts on all this. Well, for starters, the delay of the Witch Queen was rather unsurprising. Beyond Light itself was delayed partly due to COVID, but I'm sure there were a number of other factors I'm forgetting as well. It would have been irresponsible to think that Bungie was going to continue a winter release schedule for future expansions when that would give them about 9 months to work on the Witch Queen and other future expansions. especially when the winter release schedule feels like a holdover from the Activision days. Bungie no longer needs to be beholden to the whims of a publisher like that, and I'm sure it's a lot less pressure for the team to not have to compete with other releases in a very crowded holiday release window. I'm all for Bungie taking all the time they need to make the Witch Queen an absolute banger of an expansion. As for the Witch Queen itself, I can't help but come to expect quite a bit from this expansion. While I know we aren't supposed to get another Taken King or Forsaken-sized expansion, I can't shake this feeling that the Witch Queen is supposed to be big. It's a massive plot point in the grand story of the light versus dark, and there are a lot of systems being built now to support this expansion and the future of the game. I'm also curious to see how this grand saga pans out over Lightfall and where Destiny will go after, but that's a story for another time, I suppose. The first bit of good Destiny news in this post was that in regards to sunsetting being removed. While I'm surprised Bungie went this way after all the backlash before and after its implementation, this is ultimately for the best. I mean, thank Christ, right? People like Paul Tassi from Forbes have long called sunsetting a massive weight that was crushing the longevity of the game, as loot felt like it had an expiration date, and a pretty short one at that. The grind for god rolls on a weapon was largely invalidated, as most weapons would take a full year in some cases to obtain, and now these fears are squashed and the weight has been lifted. My only concern now is how will these future balancing changes to things like Fellwinter's Lie and Warmind cells be handled. Ideally, a weapon like Fellwinter's Lie would be nerfed to the point where it's still an option, but perhaps more balanced as opposed to totally outclassing other shotguns. My fear is that it'll be nerfed so hard that it'll be essentially unusable and may as well have been sunset anyway. I know some people aren't happy that sunsetting hasn't been removed from the game so that all weapons are infusible again. Realistically speaking though, Bungie has made the best possible move in this regard, as unsunsetting weapons that Bungie said were previously okay to dismantle would incur the wrath of numerous people outside of very specific individuals who have kept literally everything since day one. While yes, I am still sad this came too late that I lost my Steelfeather Repeaters and Breachlight, there is nothing stopping from Bungie reissuing these weapons in the future. This also solves the problem we were about to run into with Warmind cells, where 7th Seraph weapons, one of the best ways to create Warmind cells for builds, were about to go away forever with no guarantee of a replacement. The seasonal power grind changes are fine. While I think it's a step in the right direction, it doesn't do much to solve the overall feeling that leveling is kinda meaningless in the grand scheme of the game. It feels like a band-aid over the problem, if you will. I'm sure the Witch Queen will bring some changes to the leveling system, as well as the most substantial leveling grind since Beyond Light, if not earlier, though I don't know what Bungie could do differently in this regard anyway. It's a big issue to tackle, and it's not something they can fix within just 1 or 2 patches. The renewed focus on PvP. I'm not gonna lie, it feels great to be acknowledged. I'm trying not to get my hopes up because Bungie has said they were bringing a renewed focus back to the Crucible in Shadowkeep, and we all know how that turned out. That being said, though, Bungie has a game plan and a mission statement for the Crucible that makes me think they are genuinely committed to the future of the mode. The fact that they brought up a number of major pain points like 3-peaking, stasis balance, as well as their plans to act on that feedback also goes a long way to encourage me that the Crucible could get to a good place again. As an aside, I genuinely want to frame the mission statement from the post and hang it on a wall so every time it tells me Destiny is not a PvP game, I can point to that quote from the team and prove them wrong. I know a lot of people argued that light-based power should have been brought to the level of stasis, but I think Bungie is making the right move in balancing stasis to the level of light-based powers instead. Crucible was objectively more fun before the introduction of stasis, and if it gets neutered to be balanced to a level of all powers before Beyond Light, that's a win for me. I still struggle with the concept of being frozen and slowed in a PvP game, but if it's at least bearable, I can live with it compared to the absurdity that we're dealing with now. The Trials refresh is also greatly appreciated. I know it's kind of a meme that Trials came out half-baked despite Bungie's intentions, but I genuinely do like a lot of these changes they're making on paper. Though the idea of matching solo players against 3-stack teams concerns me, I do like the idea of allowing solo players to dip their toes into Trials of Osiris, or at least having a chance at rewards. While I think a freelance playlist would ultimately be a better move, I would love to finally experience Trials of Osiris from the inside rather as a spectator as I've been since House of Wolves. I also cannot wait to see the changes Bungie will make to Iron Banner, as a refresh to the activity is sorely needed at this point. The Vault of Glass returning is great. I'm genuinely excited to see how it plays in Destiny 2. The prospect of master level difficulties possibly being the new version of a prestige variant of raids has also piqued my interest. Being done to VoG first in particular, and wanting to add adept gear to master difficulty raids and dungeons is a rad idea, and makes me think this is how Bungie will re-implement the Age of Triumph ornament sets for the raid, assuming they are going to. I would also be curious to see if they add master level difficulties to the raids and dungeons currently in the game, though I wouldn't be surprised if they don't, at least not in the near future, because that would require them to make adept gear for all that old content as well. One thing that does confuse me though is this day 1 raid race for the Vaulted Glass. It feels sort of out of place, as not only this is a raid many people have done before, if it's changed to the point where encounters are unfamiliar, why even bother reprising this raid as opposed to making a new one? I suppose we'll have to wait and see, but it still feels like a strange move to me. Now, I do have to say, I was one of the many people looking forward to Transmog in Destiny, and I'm also very glad it's here, as the drip factor on my Guardians will now be off the charts. I'm even happier to have everyone's favorite Tsundere Exo back in the tower. However, I do have a few concerns with this system, mainly in regards to how the materials for the loom are purchasable for silver. I really don't want to run into a situation where I feel like I have to purchase these materials because the rate at which I can acquire them in the game is throttled because Bungie is being stingy. I'll give Bungie the benefit of the doubt for now that this is in place solely as a pay-to-skip and has no impact on the acquisition of the materials for the loom, but only time will tell. I also want to know exactly how exotics are impacted by armor synthesis. Can exotics be turned into universal ornaments? If so, are they still locked to 1 per slot? If not, does the universal ornament override the equipped exotic? Being able to see an exotic someone has equipped is important for being able to read what a Guardian may be capable of. And I hope Bungie has taken these factors into account when designing the system. I know I'm being a negative Nancy, and I really don't want to undersell how excited I am for this system. Finally, we have the rapid fire points. Crossplay is good. I don't have much to say. I think crossplay should be the status quo for the gaming industry. The segregation of PC and console players in the Crucible is also a good touch. I'm also very happy to hear Ikora Rey will be making a return to the narrative of Destiny, and I hope she's still voiced by Gina Torres. I'm sure she's been very busy, and I'd hate to see her recast as she's so iconic to the role, but I would not be surprised in the slightest if she were. The Stasis Elemental Legendaries are where I get a bit negative once again. I was really surprised they weren't featured to some extent in Beyond Light, where the major selling point was the new element of Stasis, especially when you have a whole Fallen House integrating it into their technology and arsenal. Besides that minor grievance, I am curious to see how this integrates into PvE and PvP, because Stasis does not serve much of a point in match game at current. Will they have unique elemental properties like slowing or freezing? I'll be curious to find out. All in all, this was a really good update. I'm really happy. I'm genuinely excited for the future of Destiny 2, and by all accounts, it seems the rest of the community at large feels much the same way. Season 13 has been really good so far, and according to this post, Season 14 should also be a banger. I'm starting to believe that old tweet from Joe Blackburn that the best days of Destiny really are ahead of us. But, say it with me now, only time will tell. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is your man, Emperor Hotshot, signing off.